How's it going, guys? Welcome back to another brand new video. Today we're taking a look at a brand new update from the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. Today is August 29th, 2021, and this is the second time I'm having to record this video because the audio decided to completely double up. And it took me 30 minutes to freaking realize that, and let's just get into the update. I'm going to get pissed off at this if I don't get started onto it. Today we're taking a look at a brand new update. For this is Project Freefall, the joint Soviet-US Soviet expedition into the Mystery Flesh Pit. An overview presentation of the 1979 survey expedition into the Mystery Flesh Pit. I've watched through this entire video already. There's going to be parts where I'm going to have to pause because the slides go by way too quickly. There's stuff I'm going to have to explain as well. I'm going to connect in and everything. So let's get started on this. We'll go into full screen here. United States Commission on Geobiological, U.S. Department of the Interior, Academic Sciences of USSR, Project Freefall. Alright, here's one of the places I'm going to have to pause because this thing likes to skip around a lot. It takes forever for it to, takes no time for it to skip over to the next slide. In 1979, a mission was proposed to study and map the gross anatomical structure of the Permian Basin superorganism through a manned vertical descent. This surveying expedition was a joint effort administered by the United States Department of the Interior in cooperation with the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Joint venture between the Soviets and the United States, something that happened during... This is happening during the Cold War, so there are still tensions between the United States and Soviet Russia, as I said, the Cold War is still raging on. But this is the first manned vertical descent into the Permian Basin superorganism, later on to be known as Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. As I said, it likes to go through. Like by the time I probably finish this, it would probably be on the next slide. That's why I have to pause. Alright. Pausing again. 6-person expedition team consisting of 3 American and 3 Soviet personnel spent nearly 6 weeks in the depths of the superorganism, conducting a wide battery of scientific observations and measurements. Despite tragedies and hardships faced by the crew during the mission, the wealth of information collected by the project has been instrumental in the fields of geobiology, bacteriology, material science, psychology, medicine, and material engineering. The tragedies and hardships part was going to be way later in the video, so we'll be talking about that as well. And of course, geobiology, bacteriology, material science, psychology, medicine, that all leads into what eventually becomes the national park that we know of, and leading up to the incident as well. But this is all taking place in 1979. Some background information. The Permian Basin superorganism was discovered in 1973 by drilling crews who believed they had found an untapped aquifer. An aquifer, let me take a look at that. I'm sure I know what an aquifer is. Yeah, okay. An aquifer, I don't think I ever looked this up. This is one of the things I didn't prepare for. An aquifer is a body of permeable rock which can contain or transmit groundwater. So they're looking for a place that has this water inside of it. Sort of similar to what we have in Arizona. I believe we have areas where we can find groundwater all over, even though it's a desert. According to one of our in Arizona, I don't know why I'm talking about this now, but I'm reading that there's about 11 million acre-feet of surface water aquifers since the mid-90s that have been found in Arizona, so that's kind of cool. The next part of this is excavation of a small nearby sinkhole revealed a colossal living portal of flesh descending into the earth. Workers began referring to this site as the Mystery Flesh Pit. Everybody else will begin referring that as well. Though the official title is the Permian Basin superorganism. Over the next 3 years, from 1973 to 1976, scattered exploration efforts slowly began to map and understand the large internal sections of the Permian Basin. Superorganism. I keep forgetting to read that. There's a picture of the interior of somebody standing there as well. Another interior photo, super dark in there. It's further back picture in the interior. And finally, one more. While widespread knowledge of and interest in the Permian Basin superorganism remained low within the general academic landscape of the Soviet Union at the time, Dr. Kazimir Vinogradov of the Soviet Academy of Science was a vocal proponent of study of the superorganism for its possible insights into the origins and early evolution of life, talking about those macroorganisms and those different parasites that could be found within inside of the superorganism. In December of 1977, Soviet Academy of Sciences President Anatoly Alexandrov responded to the U.S. Department of the Interior Secretary Cecil B. Andrus's letter proposing a cooperative geobiological expedition, and there was subsequently a meeting between Dr. Vinogradov's team and the members of the United States Department of the Interior to discuss technical details. Program objectives. I'm assuming this eventually leads to this joint venture leads to the formation of Anodyne, which is the big corporation that has led research into the pit and everything. Broadly, the joint anatomical expedition was to expand geobiological and material understanding of the Permian Basin superorganism, with the ultimate goal of lowering a human into the deepest extents of the organism. It's just basically they just want to study what the hell this thing is, pretty much. I also like the logo that they have, stating it's a joint anatomical expedition with the Soviet flag and then the United States flag. I actually want to translate. I didn't get to do that in the first place with the first video, so translating that text that's up top right there, though, if we can. I'm gonna choose Russian. It'll translate the Russian lettering, hopefully. That is not Russian lettering, I guess. That's interesting. I don't think that's actually Cyrillic, so it's not a translatable letter. Aside from the prestige of being the first human beings to make such a deep journey, the partnership held the following objectives for the joint anatomical expedition in furtherance of its geobiology research. Expedition objectives. Number 1 is precise determination of the anatomical structure throughout a vertical section of the Permian Basin superorganization. Which I'm assuming that vertical section they're talking about is eventually going to be the area that lowers with the elevator into one of the visitors, into that visitor center that they have, the lower visitor center. You know, the one that eventually collapses and kills a bunch of people in the future, thanks to that July 4th incident. Objective number 2 is bioseismic measurements from a deeper research reference depth than any prior measurements. Bioseismic, they're going to be checking the seismic frequency of it, basically sending radio waves at the walls of it to be able to properly map and measure how big the creature actually is. Distribution and diversity of parasitic fauna at both charted and uncharted depths. Basically looking for anything new, any brand new fauna that they find, any parasites that any macro parasites that they find that could possibly kill them and all that, or that can kill anybody that comes into it. 3. Engineering tests of equipment at great anatomical depths. Basically, testing their testing equipment, like the seismic readings, being able to map out a proper pathways for the basin and the organism. And one of next objective is geobiological study of the exotic anatomy environment located in the deepest known extents of the superorganism. Basically, looking at all the different anatomy that we haven't seen yet inside of that they haven't seen yet. Basically, they've been on the outside of the entire superorganism. They're going deeper and deeper into the superorganism to find things we haven't seen. Next objective is determination of the effects of occult venereal phenomena on human health and psychology. Let's see. I looked this up and I last time and I did a terrible job. Occult in medicine means not accompanied of a disease or processes, not accompanied by readily discernible signs or symptoms. Occult venereal phenomenon. Venereal. Venereal? It looks like. It seems like everything when I look up venereal, just everything relates back to the mystery flesh pit and everything. Phenomenon, of course, is things that are happening. It's just basically, I guessing, the effects from the organism on your health, on how it can improve or not improve it, or in the effect on your mental psyche and mental health and all that. That's an interesting objective as well. Goes into that. And that was all the objectives, so we're going to look at some of the key expedition personnel. The first of the personnel is Dr. Kazimir Vinogradov, Chief of Geophysical Research, Soviet Academy of Sciences, Geobiological Research Scientist, the commander of this expedition, the expedition commander. So he's the one who's basically the leader of the entire expedition. Even though there was a person in the United States who found it before him, he's the more experienced of chief of geophysical research at Soviet Academy of Sciences. He's a geobiologist, basically. And his description is, although there has been historical disinterest among the scientific societies of the USSR in regards to geobiology, Dr. Vinogradov's early research into theoretical effects of geobiological activity upon surrounding rock strata has been instrumental in the development of early warning systems developed for the Permian Basin region. During the planning of the expedition, Dr. Vinogradov directly oversaw the development of the Koronet expedition vehicle. Sorry, these names are really hard to talk. Are hard to say. I'm gonna look up Koronet because a lot of these I never looked up because translate. I'm assuming it's a Russian name because Koronet, it's Russian for berry. So it's I'm guessing it's more like a digging machine. So the Koronet expedition vehicle, the digging expedition vehicle. His primary research interest during the expedition was in conducting sonic and X-ray imaging of deep anatomical structures of the superorganism. That's an interesting thing. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit just so we can get to the next slide easier. Next up is Colonel Nikolay Morozov, Field Engineer, Soviet Army Expedition. I believe that was the next one. Yep, it is. Colonel Nikolay Morozov, Field Engineer, Soviet Army Expedition Engineer. Colonel Nikolay Morozov is distinguished for his service throughout the USSR Antarctic program in a variety of roles involving hostile environment management. So he's pretty much prepared for hostile environments, which is what they would be facing inside the superorganism. As a member of the Joint Anatomical Expedition, his duties involved maintaining the Koronet vehicle and providing security logistics in the event of hostile wildlife encounters. He's basically the go-to guy if you want somebody to take out any parasites that are trying to attack you. Next up is Lieutenant Valentina Kroschenko, pilot of the Soviet Air Force's Expedition Vehicle pilot. She's the one who's going to be piloting the Koronet. Lieutenant Kroschenko began her aviation career at 13 years old, flying rural parcel delivery before joining the Soviet Air Forces. After a rapid series of promotions, she became the youngest person in the program's history to be selected for Soviet Cosmonaut Corps. Tragically, an ankle injury sustained during training forced her resignation from the program. She has since fulfilled a variety of roles within the sphere of vehicle testing and holds the record for the deepest hard-suit dive in the Arctic Ocean. She was selected by the Soviet Academy of Sciences to pilot the experimental exotic tissue excursion pod through the blue tissue layer and into the exotic anatomy itself. So the exotic tissue excursion pod is basically an attached vehicle on top of the Koronet, which can burrow itself into deeper layers of the superorganism. We're on to our first American part of this surveying team. That is James Slip and Jim Jackson, owner and president of Jackson Surveying LLC, Navigation Expedition, second in command. I believe he was the one who originally found the superorganism and called in a bunch of people to get help him explore it. Self-described as an adventurer and explorer, Mr. Jackson's early explorations of the Permian Basin superorganism provided much of the groundwork upon which all subsequent investigations have been based. Despite no formal or discernible academic background, Mr. Jackson remains an undisputed expert on navigating the internal anatomy of the Permian Basin superorganism through what he attests is cowboy intuition. Next up is Gualtiero Ortiz, the surveying engineer at Jackson Surveying LLC. He's basically the second in command to Jim Jackson. He's the surveying instrumentation engineer and expedition surveyor. He's the one who created all the... Well, I'll just read the description so you can get a... Mr. Ortiz is a close associate of James Jackson, who began working with him some 5 years before the discovery of the Permian Basin superorganism. As an aide to Mr. Jackson, Mr. Ortiz is a capable venturial navigator and engineer, having designed many of the instruments used by pioneering explorers of the superorganism. During the surveying expedition, his oversight of the complex radiometric surveying instrumentation provided maps of an extraordinary clarity and detail which are still being used today by the National Park Service. This is what I'm assuming is these types of maps that are being used by the National Park Service. These types, there's also this one right here. That's what I'm assuming is what they were talking about, how his maps are still being used today. What's interesting, this is one thing I have to note is, like, this is a presentation from 1979, but the Mystery Flesh Pit wasn't incorporated as a national park until 1980 by President Jimmy Carter. So I don't get why this is already... Is this like a presentation that was from the future? Or is there something deeper going on that we don't understand? Because this is supposed to be a presentation from 1979. finally, our last American on the research team is Rachel Frost, PhD candidate, Chief of Ventricle Research, University of Texas, Ventricle Research Special or Scientist. She's the expedition medic. Rachel Frost pioneered the field of ventricle biology while a biology student at the University of Texas and has published an extensive catalog of research surrounding the Permian Basin superorganism. There's two thes, so that's kind of a misspelling, I guess, or a error, typo. The primary focus of her research during the expedition survey concentrated on evaluating possible effects of quartz mineral harmonics on general metabolic processes of the superorganism, and conducting tests. I tapped the microphone. Conducting tests to determine neurocognitive abilities of the superorganism. Basically, how she's trying to figure out how it digests things and how it thinks. As a long-time, highly vocal critic of human activity within the superorganism, her inclusion in this expedition was possible only through recommendation by both Dr. Vinogradov and Mr. Jackson. So she was highly vocal about people going into the superorganism, something which would prove correct after the incident, of course, that July 4th incident. So she was right. And I'm assuming we're going to be moving on to our next slide after this. Even though I do know we're going to move on to the next slide after this. Move on to the expedition outline. Here's a location of the Permian Basin, part of Texas. This is a map of Texas. Moving further into Texas, where we've got the entry site where they're going to be entering the superorganism. October 12th, 1979. Expedition Day 1. Coronet vehicle is lowered into the maw of entry orifice and affixed for crew arrival. So this is when the crew is finally going to be entering the vehicle, and and eventually entering. Yep, there's the picture of the Coronet vehicle. Interesting looking vehicle. And here is a diagram of it. It's Russian built, of course. It's Russian built because it's called Coronet. The primary expedition vehicle, Coronet. Tethered cable, atmospheric systems, batteries, viewing porthole, egress hatch, ladder, maneuvering armature, instrumentation ring. There's the attached excursion pod, which Dr. Kroschenko, Miss Kroschenko will be piloting. There's fuel tanks, hydraulic ram, which I'm assuming the ram is going to be used for ramming into things. Rotating drive head, which is to burrow into it, and some steel drive treads so they'd be able to drive throughout the flesh pit. Alright, October 12th, 1979, 3:51 p.m. 408 meters below surface. Crew and expedition vehicle depart lower base camp facility. So they're just basically starting out drilling through superorganism, or going down the superorganism. The expedition team continues the descent over the next 2 weeks, cataloging a variety of material samples while performing survey operations. Here's one of the surveyors looking through, taking. This is a picture taken of them collecting samples and performing the survey operations on the organism. 4 more minutes left in this video. October 24th, 1979, Expedition Day 12. Crew reaches 10-kilometer depth milestone. And 10 kilometers in miles is... They're about 6 miles down into the pit. Took them 12 days to get down 6 miles. I'm assuming it's because it's like really... There's a picture of the crew outside the pod. Or outside the coronet, I should say. October 30th, 1979. Day 18. Expedition Day 18. Encounter with previously unobserved macroparasitic life form. Organism flees before extensive documentation is able to occur. They finally meet one of the one of the macroparasites they've never seen before, but they're not able to document it because it ran away, pretty much. And that's what it looked like, apparently. They were only able to grab that photo, I believe. November 8th, 1979, Expedition Day 27. Coronet vehicle breaches the mesogliatic firmament chasm. An advanced base camp is established as preparations are made to begin blasting through a dense cartilaginous stratum plate at the base of the chasm. There's all these big words that I don't freaking know, and it's. I'm gonna assume cartilaginous means some kind of form of cartilage, maybe some bone, partially, possibly as well. I suck at this. I'm sorry. This is showing how far down they reach. This is the area they reach for their base camp. You see the Coronet vehicle. November 13th, 1979, Expedition Day 31. So about a month into their expedition, with the blue tissue exposed through blasting, the Excursion Pod vehicle is lowered down into the cut. So they blasted their way through, and they're able to finally use the Excursion Pod vehicle, which is going to be piloted by Kroschenko, I believe. That's what I read. Here's another picture. This is the Excursion Pod being lowered into that cut. And here is a diagram of the Excursion Pod. This is there's the tether cable, a roll cage, halogen lights, Pyrex canopy, sample containers, which of course is gathering some samples for gathering of samples for research, cable-driven manipulators. That's for so they're able to grab them, and a ceramic encasement. I'm assuming that's so it doesn't somehow get digested accidentally, because I don't believe ceramic gets digested. The single-person excursion vehicle is piloted by Lieutenant Valentina Kroschenko, not doctor. That's my fault. After approximately 4 hours, the vehicle passes into as yet unknown area of the Permian Basin's superorganism anatomy. Following a brief instrument calibration test, Lieutenant Kroschenko reports her findings via radio. Interference in the transmission results in an incomplete message. And of course, here is the Russian message. I tried to, in my previous video, I translated this, but on the next slide, it has a translation, which I'm assuming is a more proper translation than the one that I provided. So we'll just move on and get the proper translation. And the translated transmission is light, reflective and mixing, tessellation, movement of coarse tissue, prismatic, behavior, becomes like a fractal. I will continue to collect a sample of the material. And that was sent by Lieutenant Valentina Kroschenko at 2:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, November 13th, 1979. Photo plate of exotic animal anatomical environment recovered from Excursion Pod onboard imaging system. It's very beautiful looking. It almost to me looks like a galaxy, or like how that picture of the Milky Way that was sent back to Earth by one of the satellites. It looks amazing. I like the look of that. Here's another exotic anatomy sample recovered from the Excursion Vehicle onboard material sample collection rack. That is, like, the colors of it is just, that's kind of cool. I like that. After spending 5 minutes within the exotic anatomy, the excursion pod vehicle begins an automatic ascent upward through the blue tissue. During this time, transmission interference prevents radio contact between pilot and the Coronet vehicle. At approximately 4:51 a.m. Central Standard Time, a sharp tensile force is observed by the Coronet crew on the cables pulling up the excursion pod vehicle. A general alarm signal originating from the excursion pod is recorded. Pod descent operations continue at an increased pace. So something got onto the excursion pod, which caused the cables to get a sharp tensile force pulling on it. Pulling on the vehicle, I should say. At 6:02 a.m., so about 2 hours later, the excursion pod vehicle surfaces from the blue tissue cut and is hoisted upward via attachment cables. Though the onboard instrumentation is intact, the Pyrex canopy has been shattered inward. The pilot is absent with the exception of trace amounts of human blood located on the canopy shards. A search is deemed impossible without an operational blue tissue capable vehicle. Lieutenant Kroschenko is presumed dead. So we lost our pilot then. That kind of sucks. The one person who knew how to was able to pilot these is gone. Possibly caught by some kind of macroorganism, macro parasite or something. A single photo is recovered from the excursion vehicle onboard imaging system. Dated to mere moments before the tensile load event, the photograph depicts an unknown organism approximately 500 meters in width, floating within the blue tissue layer. Judging from the intense damage to the excursion pod vehicle, it is determined that an attack by this unknown organism was the probable cause of Lieutenant Kroschenko's death. And the next slide is going to be showing that photo of that unknown organism, the macroorganism. And it looks like a giant, fluffy fur ball. A decision is made by the remaining Coronet crew to abandon any additional survey activities and begin the return journey back to the surface. Aided by a series of cleaning stations installed during the prior descent, the ascent voyage is completed in 22 days without major incident. On December 6, 1979, the Coronet vehicle and crew arrive at the lower base camp facility. So everybody except Lieutenant Kroschenko was able to make it back to the lower base camp facility completely unscathed. Conclusion. The enormous expense of the program, as well as the death of Lieutenant Kroschenko, persuades the Soviet Academy of Sciences to discontinue any further activities involving the Permian Basin superorganism. Despite this, the project is considered a diplomatic and scientific success. The results of the expedition are used to justify the absorption of the site into federal control as the Permian Basin superorganism natural preserve, though it will eventually become known by the public as the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. End of presentation. And that was the end of the slideshow. This was a 1979 survey expedition of the presentation. One thing I don't get is, how did they know it was going to become a national park, though? This stuff usually takes a while before it becomes a national park. But, it seems, though, these surveys, it was they did one survey, which resulted in the death of someone, and we're going to decide, we're going to make this a national park. That's something that's really weirding me out with this entire thing. How quickly they decided how it's going to become a national park. But what do you guys think? Leave comments down in this Comments down below. Tell me what you think about this new update about the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. And hopefully we get more information in the future. I'd love the lore and the background information about this entire thing. I hope we get more. I hope we start getting some present day stuff about the superorganism. Maybe something happening with it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, ring that bell to get notifications of when we got new videos coming out, whether it be a rock band video or one that's an update about the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great night. Thank you.